I'm going to do this assignment one more time. I realized when I looked at the one that I did yesterday that it was kind of complex and my students probably were a little bit overwhelmed. So once again, in order to draw a fairly straight line without using a ruler, I've placed a dot here and a dot here about a half an inch from the top and side of each part of the paper on the left and right side. So what I'm going to do is when I put my pencil down here, before I start moving it in this direction, just like when you're throwing a baseball or throwing a ball of trash at the trash can, you always want to look at where you're going and where you're throwing it to rather than the actual line itself. A lot of people, when they try to draw a straight line, if I was visualizing the top of the paper and trying to draw a straight line, I might do a series of lines like this. Instead, what I'm going to do excuse me, is I'm going to very quickly just draw a line in that direction. I'm using my whole arm and I'm holding my pencil very lightly. And I'm holding my pencil lightly because the tighter you grip your pencil, the darker the line tends to be. So I'm holding it very loose. So once again, pencil here, eye over there. And if I miss or if I don't like the straightness of the line, I can go over it a couple of times. It looks kind of thick in here at the moment, but I'm not going to worry about that. You can see there's about almost a quarter of an inch from the top to the bottom of these two lines where I missed. But if I do it right down the middle of those two areas, when I darken that in later, I will fix it and choose the one that's in the center. So I'm going to follow that same procedure. Pencil here, go to there, and again, you might just barely be able to see this line on the paper at the moment, and that's actually a good thing. You want your lines to be very light so that you don't have to erase, and that's one of my number one rules in here. I don't want you to erase your construction lines. These are called construction lines because we're going to use them to construct shapes over the whole paper here. And again, I'm doing this a second time because the other one was fairly complex. When I'm by myself, I tend to make things a little more detailed and complex than they necessarily need to be. And I really just want especially my 6th grade students to understand the process, because they're following a process. It's not as much about the design or the composition, but that does come into play. You'll also notice that this frame that I'm drawing is about a half an inch or possibly a quarter of an inch from top to bottom here. That's thick enough for our purposes, but you do want it sort of thick. If you look at this previous drawing, some of the thicknesses of these frames, this one's probably 3/4 of an inch. That's probably a quarter of an inch. Really thick here. I'm not looking for perfection necessarily on this. Your drawing doesn't have to be perfect, but if you draw very lightly, again, you won't have to erase. So I like to start with simple shapes, and the most simple shape I can always think of is a triangle. So I'm going to do a very large triangle with the flat part at the top. I'm starting with dots to connect them, and I'm very loosely holding my pencil loosely and drawing very lightly to draw these shapes. And again, you can see this line kind of got fat in here. And when I do the final line, I'm going to do a smooth line like that. Just like the frame around the page, I want every object on the page to have a frame around it. And you'll understand why in just a moment when we start connecting all of these shapes. So I'm going to do another triangle over here. Same process over and over again. You can't see it because all you can really see is the paper here, but I'm using my whole arm. The only part of my hand that's touching the page is either my knuckle or just barely touching on my palm. I don't want you to rest your hand on the paper, but rather I want you to very loosely use your whole arm to draw these light shapes. The more of your arm that you use when you're doing this, the straighter your lines are going to be. Also, make sure that there's a little bit of a gap here on your shapes. That way, when we start to overlap them and link them like this, we have enough space to work with so that you can see some gaps in here. So I'm going to do a different sort of shape. This one's going to have 4 sides, but notice that I'm not worried about it being completely square. So again, connecting the lines, making the shapes like this. You can probably do this without the dots. I just find it a simple way to do it. Again, I want to leave a little bit of a gap in here. I might even extend this a little bit so that I can take this further. And these sort of corrections you can make as you go, because again, I want to have a nice space here for the interlocking shape connections when we get to that point. So I'm going to do one more trapezoid, and this one I'm going to take it right off the page, meaning down here at the bottom I'm going to take it way off the page this way, way off the page this way, connect these two up here. Because this area is getting tight, instead of doing it on the inside, I'm actually going to do it on the outside. And again, this is a design consideration because I want the interlocking shapes to be easy to figure out. The next type of shape that we're going to do is an oval or circular shape. So when you start to do a circular shape, imagine the circle without actually committing to the paper. I'm going to do one up here so I can overlap this corner. So I'm imagining it, and I'm kind of practicing drawing by going around and around and around. And I'm going to slowly bring my pencil down to the paper to get that shape there. It's not a perfect circle, doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I'm really only interested in the process here. So as I do this around, notice how I'm overlapping here. I'm also overlapping the frame here. And this is a little bit tight in here. So instead of doing that circular shape, I'm actually going to take this off the page to make it more like an egg shape, because I really want that interlocking feature to be prevalent here. And I also don't like it touching here, so I'm going to do the same thing on this side and make it sort of an oblong, almost egg shape on this side as well. You can alter your lines and so forth as you go, as long as you're doing construction lines that are drawn very lightly. And I'm really exaggerating this so that I can get more of this frame interaction here. It's very confusing looking here, but I'm actually going to go outside of the line here and back in here. So now it sort of looks more like an egg that's laying on its side facing that way. I'm going to do the same thing down here around this cross area. So again, get my circle, slowly bring my pencil down to the paper, and then do a circular shape here. I'm not super concerned that the lines are the same thickness all the way around. You can see how thick it is over here and how thin it is up here. But this is probably enough shape on the page now because I don't want it to get too confusing, but I do want to fill in some of this area down here. So I'm just going to do a big curving arch here, followed by another curving arch there. So this is my basic layout now. The next step of this, and because this is very confusing looking over here, is to start overlapping and interlocking the shapes. So again, it sort of looks like, see this line goes through here and behind there, but then as this comes around it goes in the front. Since this is so confusing looking over here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that you can see the details and the decisions that I'm making as I draw this. I want this frame to start right at the edge of this oval shape. So now my hand is actually on the paper. And what I want to do, because I don't want to mess up my drawing over here, I mentioned today that one of the key components of this project is that it shows great craftsmanship. And craftsmanship is defined as the care that you take with your project while you're working on it so that it doesn't become a mess. I don't want to smudge any of these lines. I want everything to be very crisp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another sheet of paper and lay it on top of here so that when I rest my hand on the drawing is protected, but I'm also not getting a lot of graphite on the side of my hand here. So here again, I'm zoomed in to the details here. Feel free to rotate your paper around. I like to look over the top of my drawing, so I often rotate my drawing around so that I can see above my pencil. I'm going to take this line down and stop right here so that it gets that chain link feel to it. And again, I'm just applying a lot more pressure here, almost so much pressure that it almost pushes through the page, but not quite. So here again, I'm going to come off the page on this egg shape. And I'm going to bring this up around here and start to bring it back down there like this. Then I'm going to continue this line on the other side of this one. Bring it around here like this and like that, so that I can continue this line around all the way to the next shape here. Once again, I'm not super concerned with keeping the thickness of the shapes or the frames of the shapes perfectly still or perfectly well. I'm more concerned with the overlap and how they look like a chain link. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. The details here, this triangle is coming here. Since I went across the front of this one and the frame that goes around the outside of the page, we're going to continue this down in a minute. But since I went in front of this one, I'm kind of alternating. So this time I'm going to have this triangular shaped frame come down here like this. Since it's going to come around this way, I'm going to alternate it. I stopped it up here so that the frame around the whole picture is going to come here in front of here. And I'm basically just dissecting this and examining it as I go. So once again, went behind here, so I'm going to have it go in front here. And I'm just looking at where this line would naturally connect. Since this is sort of a weird thing here, that point of that other triangle goes there, I'm going to stop it there and then continue it here. Draw this part of the triangle in front of that other triangle. Since it goes in front here, I'm going to have it go behind here. It's easier if you cap it off early, because this drawing can get very confusing very quickly if you're not careful. So what I mean by capping it off is, since I wanted that one to go behind this one, let's see, nope, that was sort of a mistake. That one should have gone through. But as I said before, since I don't want you to erase, I'm also not going to erase. Take this one down to there. That was sort of a mistake. I would have rather had this one go in front, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It'll be fine. It does link here. It just doesn't link up there. So this triangle goes in front of that one, but we'll link it over here. Once again, this is going to come down in front of this other trapezoid shape or quadrilateral shape. We're learning a lot of mathematics terms on this project. We've dealt with trapezoids and quadrilaterals, rhombus shapes. And I'm just trying to be as conscientious as possible as I'm drawing this. So this one's going to go there. Since it goes in front here, we're going to have this other shape go in front of it here, so that our chain link interacts with each other. It's okay to start and stop. At some point in the future, we may do this assignment again and use rulers, but at this point, we're just doing it freehand. So I'm going to come across here because this one goes in front. Since this comes down here, I'm going to have this arch go in front of the frame. But over here, I want it to go behind this part of it. So let's see, which way should we go here? Continue this line down. Went behind here, so we're going to go in front here. And we can continue this line down. Bring this over. Since this one goes in front, I was going to say this one should go in front of the frame here, but since it's in front here and I want to alternate, I'm going to actually do it behind it this time. These are visual decisions that you make kind of on the fly as you go. And it's just to give it that interlocking look. So continuing along, I prefer to draw on this side of the paper, so I'm going to actually flip the whole thing over and just make sure that I continue the process. This one's going to stop here, so I'm going to take this down to here and stop it where this one starts. So that this line can go in front. This one goes behind here. Since it went in front of this one, even though it's going behind that one, I'm also going to have it make it go behind this circle frame. Oh, it's going to get real fun and confusing in between here where it crosses over, so let's see which one we want to do. We'll wait a minute till we do that one. So the best way to do this is to just start and stop where the lines are and then decide which one's going to go where. Since it's going to go in front of this one here, I think it'll go behind there. So let's see what that looks like. There's no real hard and fast rule on this, as long as it looks like it's interlocking, so that if gravity were involved and these pieces started falling, they would fall and link together. So since it goes in front of there and there, I'm going to have it go behind here. And let's see, go here. Go in front here. This one came across the front of the frame here. So in this case, that triangle to interlock is going to have to go behind this one. Or I should say this area of this one. Going to go up here and go behind that one. This one isn't really connected to anything on this side. And finish up this circle frame. Not really liking the way this looks up here. I would have rather it wrapped, but I've already started this one. So I'm going to do something a little weird on this one. And this is how you can alter things. Since I want this to go up here, I'm going to extend this line up. And then I'm going to do something fun over here. By stretching this up so that I can get some of that interaction over here. Again, I'm not erasing anything, and you'll see why when I start shading it, why we do it like this. By the time we get to the shading part, a lot of these shapes are going to sort of disappear. And what I mean by that is a lot of these lines are going to be shaded over the top of it. So even though this isn't the type of geometric shape that I started off with, kind of made a little fun lightning bolt shape here. Take this one up to the top, continue it there. Take this one up to the top, continue it there. Want this one to come in the front of here. And then we just got to finish off the frame. It dipped a little bit there. I wasn't real happy with the way that happened, but again, we're just practicing doing a composition. And so they don't have to be perfectly square. And every line doesn't have to be perfectly drawn. So this is my finished composition. The next thing I'm going to do on here, and I taught this in class today, is all of the negative space surrounding all of these objects, these frames, is going to be, a tone is going to be added to them. Think of it as shading, but basically the negative space is everything around the objects. And so I'm going to take the side of my pencil, I'm holding my pencil like this, and I'm going to lay it down so that the lead, this triangle piece of the lead here at the tip, is going to be touching the page at the same time, so that I can add a middle gray tone around the shapes in the negative space area. That is not a very good pencil. Let's try another one. There we go. Now, the key thing on here is Please don't smudge your drawing with your finger. Don't run it like this just to get an even tone. We want to do all of this toning just with the side of the pencil. And I want the gray here to be sort of a medium or mid-gray because we're going to add a shadow to it later. And I'll probably do that all in one sitting. This is going to be a really long video. Normally don't like to do my videos this long, but since I did the other one, the more complex one, before, yesterday, I'm going to go ahead and do the whole project on this one. So again, I'm just adding a gray tone back here. I'm not super concerned that it's perfect. As far as I went a little bit over there, I'm not real happy that some of these marks hid in here. You can kind of almost start to see these white lines that are in here? That's because I've been drawing on this orange sheet and it's very textured. You can't see it, but I can feel the texture on here. Let's see if I change the light a little bit. You can see from pressing down, it's created all these ridges. And when you go over the top of it to get a smooth color, or a smooth tone, excuse me, it's picking up all of those ridges that are in the paper. And of course, whenever I rotate it around, it just sort of continues that. Kind of gives it a neat pattern if you look, if you can see those details. Let me see if I can zoom in to see the details of what I'm talking about. So you see all these white lines here? That was from the indentation of the paper, from when I was drawing the lines and rotating and drawing the lines. So it gives it sort of a, almost gives it a texture there. So I'm just going to continue around. Give it a nice tone. I'm taking the tone all the way to the edge of the paper. If I can figure out how to do it later, I might speed this part up. I'm not a super video tech type person yet, but I'm learning. So I have to figure out maybe how to get some music put in the background and speed this part of the video up. If it gets to that point, though, I'll have to redo the narration too, because I tend to, as you can tell, I sort of like to talk my way through it. It's that awkward silence thing. Kind of feels weird if there's no conversation going on, and since there's no music playing in the background. The nice thing about no music in the background too, of course, is I don't have to worry about copyright or trademark or any of that stuff, whichever one it is, that YouTube might shut me down because I don't have permission to play certain music or play any music at that point, because I'm not a musician. And since I don't want to buy any music, see, this is where not erasing is okay, because I'm going right over the top of those old pencil marks. And also, I know that students are really concerned about this. One of my hard rules is I don't want the students to erase anything. You can see all the mistakes I made in here when I was trying to figure out the better way to do this. But at this point, all of these are going to go away because I'm going right over the top of them. And the ones that I'm not going to go over, like all of this mess in here, I'm not going to worry about it. This is just an exercise in composition and design. And what I mean by that, composition is how you arrange things on the page. So as we were kind of randomly choosing these various shapes and putting them on the page and then overlapping them, there's a little bit of design and composition that's going on, almost in a subliminal way. When I look at the original drawing and so forth, there was a lot of empty space here originally. Notice there's a whole ton of detail up here and not so much down here. And that's okay. That's what's known as sort of an asymmetrical design, meaning it's not the same on both sides. So, continuing, almost done with this part. I still have to do the frame all the way around the outside. As I've mentioned to my students in class today, the benefit of doing videos for my middle school students is if they missed anything in class, if they weren't paying attention, if they were talking to their buddies or whatever, they can watch this video at home and try this at home. I'm a huge proponent of not giving homework. As I mentioned to my students today, I don't assign homework. There's enough time in class, as long as you're doing your work and you're being diligent about getting the work done. There's no reason in this type of class for homework. The only exception to that is, and it's not really homework per se, the only exception is on occasion I'm going to ask students to take photos with their cell phones and then put that photo or group of photos in a folder in their Google Drive. And I'll have a demo on that later of how to create a Google Drive folder and how to send the photos to their drive and share their Google Drive with me. That'll be in a video probably tomorrow or the next day. So this is the basic layout. It's got all of the features that were part of the assignment. Geometric shapes, we've got the angular geometric shapes and the more organic geometric shapes. That one's super organic. Notice how it doesn't really take away from the design, even though you can still see, you can see that line through there. You can see all of the different decisions I made in here. I'm not really bothered by that. I'm really more focused on this particular part of this assignment of understanding the process and following it step by step. So the last part of this particular assignment is we're going to put a shadow underneath and to the right of all of these shapes, and also on top of where it overlaps. Here's what I mean. Imagine this triangle, and actually every shape on here. Imagine if you duplicated it and moved it to the right and down. That would cause a shadow to fall here. And all I'm doing is I'm applying more pressure at the tip, but I'm still using the side of the pencil. Let me zoom in here. So it's actually going to be darker right next to the line, and as it goes away from the line, it's going to get lighter going this way. So I'm applying pressure here. Again, I'm just continuing this shadow here. And I'm going to go around the entire thing. Now notice here's a detail that a lot of people are going to miss. Since it's shifted down and over, I'm not going to start right on the corner. I'm going to start the width of the shading from the corner there, so that you can actually see a little bit of a corner here. That's a little subtle detail that I know a lot of students are going to miss. In fact, some students in certain classes have already started doing this part of the process, and some of them unfortunately weren't really listening because they did shadows on both sides. They did it on this side and that side. Again, this is just even though it is a graded assignment, we're just practicing and learning the process. And since it's a multimedia design class, we're actually going to reproduce it on the computer as well in an application called, or a website called Clecky. Clecky is basically a paint program, a very simple paint program. And here again, I'm going to stop before I get to the top of the corner here to leave a little gap here. It's similar to Photoshop in that it has layers, but it's not as sophisticated as Photoshop is. So, just to get a whole view here, again, I started a little bit away, maybe a quarter of an inch or less away from this corner, and about a quarter of an inch away from this corner, so that you can see this shadow that's underneath here. And I'm going to emphasize the opacity or the darkness of this line right next to the shape. Now you can wait and do this till later, but I want to show one more subtle detail that I'm going to start doing as I go, and that is, since this frame goes over the top of this arch, I'm going to use this same tone on this shadow here. So I'm just going to lightly put this in here. So the shadow is going to go from really heavy-handed here to very light here. I also like to put just a little bit on this side so it kind of lifts it off the page, and I'm just barely touching the paper at this point. I can do the same thing here. And again, I'm just kind of matching this middle gray tone here on the white part of that shadow that it overlaps here. So continuing on, see if I can keep in the middle of the frame here so that you can see what I'm doing. Some of these are really difficult. Circles are very difficult because you have to imagine where that shadow is going to fall. Basically, it's going to be on this side of it, and right about here, bring it down here. Because again, you have to visualize that circle dropping down that way. And same thing on this side. It's going to be pretty dark here, but I'm going to stop before it gets to there. Because you have to imagine that these shapes are lifted off of the page and on top of each other, like here. So again, a little bit of middle tone gray here, very less amount here, and just continue this process all the way around. If I sit long enough in my classroom without moving, the lights go off. So I have to stand up and do a little dance in the middle of my video. We've been going for 37 minutes, and that's the first time the light just shut off. In fact, I think it shut off in the other video too. If I'm not mistaken, it went dark for a minute. So what I'm doing is, right here I'm applying a lot of pressure. And as I go away from this shape, I'm doing it a little bit less so it kind of tapers the shadow a little bit. It's one of those things that you'll learn over time as you do this more often. I've done this project, I think I've done this particular project or this drawing maybe 24 times over the course of the last couple of years. I only just started recording it last year. So I might already have this video on one of my YouTube channels already. But it never hurts to have more. So again, this goes up in here. Now the shadow is going to go on the inside of this oval. And stop about there. Do it lighter there on the middle tone. Dark on the edge, taper it off there, also here. Applying more pressure here. So, I'm going to continue this process all the way around on all of these shapes. This is going to be a very long video, but at least I'll have it all in one place. I should say all in one video, so that you can see it from start to finish. Along this edge, and here. The thing about these shadows that not a lot of students recognize is, if you're a perfectionist, this is going to drive you nuts. You can't really be a perfectionist when you're doing this level of detail. I mean, you can try, but you'll drive yourself nuts trying to make the shadows all look the same. No one is going to look at that level of detail on this type of drawing. Certainly not me. So if you're one of my students, don't worry if it's not perfect, even if you messed up and did shadows on both sides like that one student did today. The drawing still looks good, and for a lot of them, this is probably one of the most detailed drawings they've done in a while. That wasn't something they were trying to draw as far as like representational art. And for a lot of students, they just haven't drawn anything in a really long time. You can start to see that I'm getting graphite on the side of my hand here. Since I don't want to drag it onto the page, this is where your shield or your cover page goes, so that we can continue to try and focus on keeping the drawing clean, free from smudges. You can really lean on the pencil at the top where it touches the white frame to distinguish between this part on that line where the shadow falls. And this pencil's a little uncomfortable to use because I sharpened it at both ends. So I'm kind of poking myself in the hand here, which is a little bit of a drag. But I'll get through it. Not a big deal. I'll survive. Just working all the way around. I'm going to go all the way around the inside of this frame on the top. Depending on how methodical you are, you might want to do every shape individually and render it as you go. A little bit lighter shadow there, little touch there. Bring it in here. Lighter shadow there, that's call that the mid-tone shadow, mid-range shadow. And again, you can just rotate your page around. Just make sure you look up every so often to make sure that you are doing the shadow on the correct part in the correct direction. I made a little bit of a mistake there. I went too much into the white, but I'm not going to erase any part of this, because I want to model for the students that it is not necessary that things be absolutely perfect. I don't want to discourage the students by making them think that everything has to be exactly so and just perfect. For this thing, this is just an exercise in composition and basic drawing skills. And as I said before, this is kind of becoming one of my favorite projects, my favorite drawings. Just in the last 2 days, I've done one of them for every class. So this is my 7th or 8th one. I teach 5 classes per day, so I did one in each class, and then I did one after school yesterday, which I didn't do the rendering on. But so I'll end up with 7 of these. Maybe put them all up on the wall and photograph them, just to show the different compositions. The other reason I like to do one for each class other than just the demonstration is it shows the students that there's an expectation for what I want them to complete. So if I'm doing 5 of these or 7 of these, certainly they can do 1 of them. Coming up on the 45-minute mark here for this particular drawing. See if I can finish it in the hour mark. My expectation for my students is I'm demonstrating these drawings in class every day, and if I can finish one of these drawings in an hour. Granted, it's uninterrupted time, so I don't have anyone here chit-chatting while I'm trying to draw. And I find that that is probably one of the ways that students are the least successful in my class. If they're sitting next to a chatterbox, they're not going to get as much work done. I do allow for a lot of discussion in my class. Students know they can talk pretty much freely as long as I'm not lecturing. But some of the students get in trouble from that because they, for some reason, feel like they have to stop drawing in order to talk. And I point it out often. Obviously, I'm talking and drawing at the same time now, but this is something that I've taught myself how to do. Meaning, it's not the easiest thing in the world to talk and draw at the same time. But you can learn to do it. And so for my students, I oftentimes say, yeah, just keep talking. You're doing fine. As long as you don't stop talking, or excuse me, as long as you don't stop drawing to talk. You don't have to look at, they think they have to be looking at their buddy in the eye if they're talking to them. And in an art class, that is just not necessary. It's not true. You can completely focus on your drawing and talk at the same time. And even though I'm a professional, and what I mean by that is I'm a professional art teacher, and I've been doing these kinds of videos for 6 or 7 years now, it is possible to learn. It is a skill that can be learned. And in fact, I often tell the students, if you cannot talk and draw at the same time, guess which one has to stop. If you cannot talk to your neighbor and do your project in class, you need to just not talk at all. And that's kind of dull, kind of boring. I really want them to have fun in my class. I want them to be light and loose with their conversation. So it looks like that's it. Let me just point out some of the details here. See if I missed anything. Shadow goes around there, there, yep. Oh, maybe just a little bit here, a little bit there. The shadow on the top of each is not totally necessary. I just think it gives it a little more depth. So that's my finished drawing. Hey, 48 minutes. Look at that. Finished drawing in 48 minutes. So that's the expectation. If it takes students twice as long to do it, and they do it half as well as this, that's what an A looks like.